Welcome to the London Horror Movie Club. I'm horror writer Lauren Jane Barnett.
And I'm Chris Sapikowski, Lauren's older brother, and I've been watching horror movies since I was 8.
Join us as we talk about the wild, weird, and wonderful horror films set in England's eerie capital.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. This January, Chris and I have been watching Frenzy. It's Alfred Hitchcock's most violent movie, and it was his return to filming in London after 20 years, but it's surprisingly little known, and it wasn't actually very popular when it came out. It's the story of bartender Dick Blaney, who, after a run of bad luck, is framed for a series of brutal murders known as the Necktie killings. All right, Chris, what did you think?
I did not like it. I think I mentioned in a previous episode that we had before when we picked it, I've never seen, minus Psycho, actually the remake of Psycho, which was shot frame by frame, but I've never seen an Alfred Hitchcock movie beginning to end. And this was not a sales pitch to go watch more for me. I thought it was boring. I did not like, it was 2 hours. So there were 3 killings. So I guess I think I was looking more of like a thriller horror type, and that was supposed to be more of like a thriller suspense. And so I think my mindset was wrong.
I think it's totally fair to say that, because obviously for people who know Hitchcock's career, his whole thing was tension, the stressful and the you didn't quite see anything. And then in the 70s, they had this huge change in the laws here, or in Britain anyway, about what you could show on film. And so Hitchcock came and was like, all the stuff that he made a living not showing, he showed. And quite a lot of people like you thought, well, there's a reason he doesn't show it. He can't do this. This is terrible.
It was very odd. So previously we had done Night of the Demon, and it was the black and white, that really early film. And I was like, but it held up to me. The story held up to me. This movie just was it's the 70s, and it just hits you in the face over and over and over again. And that's fine. But it was I couldn't get into the movie. It was never, the opening scene has, the flying in down the River Thames, and it goes through the Tower Bridge.
Yeah.
And then it go to politicians speaking about cleaning up the river and how London's dirty, and then all of a sudden, oh, there's a necktie killing. But then nobody's real, people are surprised, but they're oh, it's just one of those necktie killings. And after they find out who it is. So I would assume, and maybe London in the 70s was like this, that people were floating up on the river all the time, but that would be a bigger shock. No one was really surprised.
I will agree. I don't think it's Hitchcock's best film. In fact, I think it's his worst. So I'm sorry it's your introduction to him. But the thing I like about this film is that because it's sort of like a joke on London. London was so known for having these weird obsession with broadsheets. What is it called back home? People magazine and stuff.
Okay, yeah.
Tabloids.
So the tabloids.
The
Yep.
tabloids. Thank you. And so it has throughout the film, there's these jokes the woman's dead body comes after they're talking about cleaning out the Thames. A dead body is floating in through the trashy Thames.
Right.
And they're all like, ooh, it's another one. Is that my school tie? What's going on? They're all busybodies. So I kind of liked that because it was really funny to me. But I guess it doesn't make sense outside of that.
That makes more sense now to me, because there was a scene later on in the movie after Dick quits, and he's kind of floating from pub to pub, and he's in another pub when they're talking about how this killer has struck again, and that they're two MPs sitting in a pub and I kind of like it because it does well for the tourist trade, and they were kind of saying, well, it's no Jack the Ripper, and there's always little comments. So now I guess that part makes sense to me, why those little, the school tie thing, is that my school tie, or is that yeah, let's not clean this up, or he's joking with the barmaid you better be careful or you could be next. But then oh yeah, isn't that the guy who rapes and then kills him? And I'm what who's doing this?
It is a little heartless. I will totally give you that. But yeah, I think the trouble though is if you can't enjoy the movie, if you don't know that doesn't say good things about the movie, does it? Because if you need to read a book to like a movie, that's probably not a great movie, is it?
No, I mean, I definitely think you want to develop characters and develop the storyline so that your audience understands the jokes. You can have inside jokes at things, but like that's pretty inside joke. Like if that's like the way that, I mean, I guess, or maybe I'm just not quick enough on my feet to like realize that like they're talking about how the River Thames is filthy. We're going to clean it up and then here's this dead body coming in.
Yeah, that's
I
funny.
didn't put 2 and 2 together there.
So the one thing, I don't think it's a very scary film. Okay, it's not a scary film at all.
Not a scary film. No.
But the one thing I liked is it has those little jokes, those little bits of humor. I was going to ask you if you did find any of the little moments funny.
I did. So there's a scene where the chief inspector has the other or like his detective come around for dinner, and his wife is like the stay-at-home, the housemaker wife, and she's cooking dinner and she wants to make him a margarita like the guy, and he was like no way that this detective was like, yeah, I want tequila and a margarita. Like, he was like very like, that was funny to me because they tried to put some humor in there. Like I thought that part was funny. Just like she was like, oh, well, you'll have to have them come around for dinner after they realize they got the wrong man. And then like, and I can make this, this, and this. And all that the chief inspector character could say to his wife was like, well, after prison food, I'm sure it'll be a change. He didn't even say it'll be a good change. It'll be a change. So yeah, I mean, like there was some humor parts in there. Everything just seemed like very much like watching a play that I did not know what I was. So I guess the age of the film kind of that at this time it kind of took away from me liking the storyline. Maybe the main guy who is the killer.
Oh, Bob Rusk.
Bob Rusk. He's Bob's your uncle. Like I laughed, but like it was one of those movies. Like I guess I'm used to like thrillers where like I watch them now and like, okay, I'm like, who's this going to be? What's going to happen? And as soon as he's talking in the very beginning, I'm like, well, that's the guy.
Yeah.
So I'm watching it and I'm like, I'm waiting for more and more. And then it just wasn't there for me.
I guess what I really want to know is, do you think there was a way to salvage this movie? If you went in there with like an editor and like cut away a lot of the time, could you save it? Or is it just doomed from the start?
Man, smarter minds than me would have to do that. Cause thinking about it, like, no, I mean, I don't know. Like the cast was fine to me. And actually I recognized different actors or actresses in the movie. Bernard Cribbins plays Felix, the bar owner in the beginning, like the first bar, the Globe pub, I think.
The Globe.
And like, I know him from Doctor Who, and he was like an older gentleman at that point. But like, I was like, I know him, and he's like a young man. So like, I know that they got like, I mean, this wasn't like a B movie, or this wasn't like an independent film where like they're just grabbing people that they can get. Like this was like a real movie, but like I just I don't know how you would edit it to make it more thriller. And also you got to keep the tongue sticking out of everyone that's dead. I can't take it. It made me laugh like you're laughing now. And like in a suspense movie or a thriller movie about serial killers, it felt more scary movie, or like those movies that they make to make fun of the scary movies. Mm-hmm. That's when you see the tongue sticking out. Like everybody had like an atrocious, huge tongue sticking out the side of their mouth when they're dead. Like, I don't know if that's just to say like, hey, they're actually dead. So I would cut that part out immediately because it just made it more humorous as opposed to like scary or suspenseful to me.
That I will say, I think you're right. The strong image I have is that there's 3 women are murdered in this, like he said, and the first one is in a chair, and you get this shot of her after she's dead, and she's sitting in this chair with this massive tongue sticking out. And then it basically was like Alfred Hitchcock took a picture of that and then made every of the other women who were dead, there was that exact shot. He
loved that shot. Yep.
Because Anna Massey is like, she's supposedly died ages ago in an apartment. They shove her in a potato truck. The potato truck's going down the highway, and like Bob Rusk realizes he's left evidence. So he's in there, he's rooting her around this entire time, driving, stopping, being rooted through potatoes, shoved in a potato truck. Her tongue is in the exact same position.
Still out. It never moved. So he's been jostling her legs that are like poking around out so that the drivers or the people that are looking can see. He's jostling her whole body around, but the face is still to the side with the tongue sticking out.
Yep. It's ridiculous.
So these are the things that took away from the movie for me. Like you have a serial killer who rapes his victims and then murders them by strangulation. And I feel like even like the new CSIs and stuff, like there's more interesting there than it is in this movie because of the tongue. It's more comical. But I also understand that at the time, this was new for, like you were saying, this was new for them to be able to show this type of stuff on film. So when he goes to the matrimony office for Dick's ex-wife, who is I guess that's the first kill that you see him killing. And they're trying to show the rape, but like, obviously you can't show rape, nor should you show a rape. But like, I think they could have done it differently. It was just like camera jousting around and like, there's just chaos. And then all of a sudden, like, teethy grin with a tongue sticking out. And you're like, oh, she's dead now. It just seemed like he was trying to figure out how to do it. And maybe that's because it was new and we've had 50 years I think you could almost do more with less there, where like, you didn't even have to show that scene. You could show where he was like, says, hey, you're the one. And she's like, oh my God, you're him. And then you could just cut to it afterwards. You don't need to show all that other stuff. And it would just be just as suspenseful.
I totally agree. And I think that there's a really good example of that later in the film. So Hitchcock was great at that kind of cutaway thing. Do you remember when Anna Massey's character, Babs, the girlfriend with the red hair?
Yep.
She needs a place to stay because she gets kicked out by the guy who runs the pub. And Bob Rusk comes sort of behind her and is like, oh, you can stay at my place. I'm going away for the weekend anyway. And he walks her up to the apartment and then he opens the door and he says, you're my kind of girl, which is what he said to the previous. And then the door closes. And this is my favorite scene in the whole film is the camera backs up, like you stay focused in front. You don't see the way out and it just backs down the stairs and outside and you just know she's dead.
Yep. That was better.
That was the best.
Yes, that was better because if you can't do a kill scene, because we've talked about this before, I love good kill scenes in horror movies. But if you can't do a scene that's either realistic or just outrageous, then that is better because now your mind does what you want it to do. Like you see what's going on, but without seeing it. It made you process that information, which, yes, I agree. That was definitely better. And there was some good things. I could see why Hitchcock is liked or why people think he's great with different things that he does. I think he was probably ahead of his time in some aspects of filmmaking, but I'm not a filmmaker. I didn't go to film school. I just watch a lot of movies and it just wasn't like it was very jumpy to me. It was very just certain angles. I was like, well, that's an interesting angle to do, but like maybe he's trying to capture something else. So I wanted to ask you, like, they mention Leicester Square. They are on the River Thames. They are in different pubs. But do you feel like that's a quintessential London movie?
So absolutely yes, but that comes with a huge asterisk of I think it's a Londoners London movie. The thing I know gets said a lot is when people film in London, there's a huge pet peeve that you film totally unrealistically. You're running from Tower Bridge and that takes you to St. Paul's, then you're out in the side. Just none of it makes sense. Hitchcock filmed all of for anyone who hasn't seen it, the main bulk of the film is set around Covent Garden, the old vegetable market as it was in the 70s. And he actually films the pubs and the apartments and stuff are actually within walking distance so that you walk in real time with the characters from one location to another. So it's actual London. And then you have those jokes that feel very London, like, this is the cleanest river ever. Here's a dead body floating in it. That's such a London joke, like, of course, and like with the pubs, they're taking the piss at the lady and be like, oh, you never know, he'll come after you, and she's like, oh, bugger that, they're very so it feels really London, but it feels like London for if you know and love London. I can't imagine if someone's never been, it feels like a London movie. What do you think?
As someone who's only visited there a handful of times, it like the fly-in scene in the beginning makes it feel London because you're even in the 70s without what it looks like now, because I was actually very shocked at like, wow, this is obviously a scene of London and I've been at this angle basically, and the city doesn't look anything like this anymore. Like it's just grown up. But so you're in London, but like once you get past that first scene, it could have been anywhere to me. It could have been New York City, it could have been Boston, it could have been, you got your market, you got your your pubs and your street, but like that could be bars. I mean, I know it's English and they have their English accents and it's, your bobbies are running around and doing stuff, but like, it just didn't feel I knew it was in London, but to me, not living in London, not knowing that, like I don't have that feel of like that snarky that comes along with living there, where it's like, Clean River, and then there's stuff like that, like where I wouldn't joke about Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
But like I could see where someone would be like, this is great, man. People come here and they ask about our serial killer. Just like, fantastic. Yeah, no, I just was curious how you felt about that, because it definitely, it was like, hey, we're in London. And then I couldn't really tell that it was London anymore after that.
See, this is maybe the trouble here, honestly, is that I wrote a book about what this was about. So I'm really invested in the location. But
right.
I'm surprised you didn't recognize it, because he's a Londoner, and because he grew up in London, his dad actually was a vegetable seller at Covent Garden Market. So like he's going back to all these Londony places. So like there's a scene where Dick and his girlfriend have run off to a park to try and hide from the police. And you see in a very tall hotel building, to a Londoner, you go, that's Hyde Park. And that's the Hyde Park Hilton. I see that every day. But I guess that doesn't come across if you are walking by London every day.
I just figured she was in an apartment building up top. And I didn't, it didn't, I knew it was a park. They're obviously like, what do? We got to go tell the cops. I can't go tell the cops, blah, 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 back and forth. And then the guy runs out and he starts talking to them. And then he brings them up. So you understand, like, hey, it follows along where you're like, okay, this was the woman who was watching him. She thinks that he's the killer, but his friend's like, no, dear, he's not. It's all misunderstanding. But I would have never put, this is Hyde Park, and this is a building that everyone knows that's around Hyde Park, because it's probably one of the taller buildings right next to Hyde Park, honestly.
It is. It's much taller than most buildings near Hyde Park. Okay, I
so
gotta
maybe
know
it's just lost on me. It's just lost on me then as a non-Londoner.
But that's the thing, is Hitchcock was making it for Universal. This was an American. Some of the criticisms about this film is that they made the script too American. They had to bring in someone to fix it because Hitchcock was too American. So like people were using the wrong units. There's a scene. I'm getting really boring now. So tell me if you think people will find this level of detail really annoying. But there's a scene where they, after having gone to the marital service and having murdered the ex-wife, the police come and talk to the assistant, and they ask the assistant, who was this guy who had just left, which it turns out to be Dick. But she gives him like the height, the dimensions and everything, and she gives him his weight in pounds. His weight in pounds.
I caught that when I watched it.
Yeah, totally.
I was
not
like,
true.
No way in the world that woman would say, and about 152 pounds. I don't know what the conversion weight would be, but I know there's a stone in there somewhere.
Yes.
Because I've heard it, and I've watched at least enough boxing over there to know that their weight is by stones and not by
it's stones and pounds. You're totally right.
Another thing that I caught, and like this is what happens is when I stop losing interest in the movie, and if I'm not as like enthralled with the movie, I start picking at little things here, and I'll like Google while I'm watching.
Okay.
He's on the potato truck. They're driving. After that scene, the cop comes to the dinner at the chief inspector's house, and he's like, yes, the only time that the truck stopped was here on its way to here, and no one's ever seen them. And I looked it up on the map, and I'm like, that is nowhere near London. So like they have like a 2.5 hour drive, but like you don't see any of that. And then how did he get back to London? So if he went all the way to wherever, and I was just trying to pull it up on my map here, and unfortunately it doesn't pull up to where I was looking, but I was like, wait a minute, like there's just questions that now I have more questions that have nothing to do with the movie. I know, but I'm like, wait a minute, you could have done that. They're taking potatoes 2 hours north. Like for what reason?
Yeah, that I have a huge problem with the potato scene. So the potato scene is funny to watch because you're watching this guy on a moving truck and he's digging through the potatoes. The dead woman's foot keeps going in his face. And I thought that was hilarious. But it's totally pointless to the movie. You don't actually okay, he's looking for some evidence. But why a potato truck driving to the middle of nowhere? Like you said, why are they taking potatoes away from the market that sells potatoes to a farm? Isn't it supposed to be the other way around?
I'm just saying, these are the things that I keep looking at, and I'm like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Why? Like you said, the scene was fine. I actually did laugh. I laughed at the fact that after all of this, moving around, bumping around, he pulls off the side of the highway onto a curb, which would have jostled this huge truck around. She's still in the same spot, tongue sticking out, all that stuff. So like, I'm laughing at that part, but then why are you, it just didn't make sense. But there were little things, and maybe it's because it is Americanized England. Like, hey, he lived right above the pub that he worked in. I mean, they show him getting ready kind of in that first scene, and he like puts his tie on and he walks down and turns a corner, like walks down 6 steps, turns a corner and gives himself a brandy or an ale. And I'm like, all right, well, that doesn't, that's very London. You live above the pub. Like, I get it, but it's just, there was enough that didn't grab my attention in this movie.
Fair enough. It makes sense. It's not a great movie, but I do think it has one of the best last lines of any horror movie of that time. So nowadays we're really good with the script. We're very quippy. But if you remember from Night of the Demon last time, the movie kind of ends in a stereotypical like, oh, everything's going to be okay from now on. Hurrah. The last line of this film, the police officer, who, by the way, is Lieutenant Oxford. How ridiculous is that? Is that, oh, he must be a British police officer. Sorry. The officer has snuck into Bob Rusk's apartment. He sees Dick Blaney, who's come in to try and kill Bob to get revenge. But instead, there's another dead woman with her tongue out on the bed. Dick thinks he's going to get arrested, but the officer knows that Bob Rusk is the one who's done it. So he asks him to be quiet. They hear Rusk coming in. He comes in. He sees the cop. He realizes he's caught. And then the cop says, Mr. Rusk, you're not wearing your tie. And that's the last line of the movie. And I think it's so great. Is it just me?
You know what? I didn't catch it. Or I mean, I remember it, but it didn't strike me then. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I mean, because he knew, like at that point, like you said, he knew. So he knew what he was doing. I didn't realize that was like one of those one-liners like Arnold Schwarzenegger used to be, like he'd throw a sword through somebody and be like, stick around, or, like something like that. So that would be like that, like one line, like, we got our man, like, you're not wearing your tie. Dun, dun, dun. And like ends. So no, I didn't catch that. I mean, there were redeemable qualities in the movie. I just don't know if, like, I like to always think, could you remake this movie and it be any good? And I think people would stay away from it.
That's fair. That's totally fair.
Maybe not.
It is really, the thing is, it is really boring. Like, it is too long. The crazy
there was
thing
2 hours of no kills. Like, or no.
All kill.
I shouldn't say that. There were 3 kills in the movie? Like, I like the scene where he goes to Bob's house and he sees what he thinks is Bob sleeping and starts to hit Bob without uncovering from the sheets and then realizing it's like, so that scene, I'm like, all right, that's cool. Like, how is he going to get out of this? But then the police officer comes in at the same time. So I thought that scene was really good. And I like the fact that Bob's bringing down the big trunk so you kind of hear it. Although it did, I mean, again, like, I'm already in that mindset of like, this movie hasn't like grasped me, like, and I'm like, oh, this is, I just pictured like 2 guys like banging something against the wall to make that sound. Because I'm like, I can't imagine that sounds like the trunk. So like, I'm just picking it apart at this point. But yeah, I mean, that scene, I mean, him being like hitting the wrong person, and now he gets caught with a weapon in his hand, this dead person on the bed. It can't go well, only to find out like, oh, there's more to the story, and the cop knows and all that. So there was good stuff. It's just, there was things that took away from it for me. So I wouldn't recommend the movie to any of my friends.
And I have to be honest, I would only recommend it to people who really were into the London horror thing. I don't think as a horror movie, it's not the one I'd recommend from Hitchcock. If you do want to see a decent Hitchcock movie, well, actually, if you're thinking more horror-y, Rear Window is really good. But if just thriller, Vertigo, you and I both are afraid of heights, and that does that very well and really disturbingly.
So I've heard of both of these. These are both movies that are more widely acclaimed of Hitchcock's, are they not? Like Vertigo,
they're much
Rear
better,
Window. Yeah. So I'm not giving up on Hitchcock by any means. It's just this movie just wasn't, as a first Hitchcock film for me, that I might have chosen wrong. is all I'm saying. So yeah. I'm glad I watched it. I mean, I can say, hey, I've seen it. There was, it's always interesting to see someone put a story on film, and I can't do it. So, I mean, that part is interesting to me, and I'm happy to watch it. If we weren't discussing the movie, or at least like going to talk about it here on the podcast, I don't know if I would have finished it. I honestly would. I mean, I'm looking at like IMDb and stuff when I like look at the movies, and I'm like, this has like almost an 8 rating, and like people like really like it. So after I watched the movie, I was sitting there and I was like, what did I miss? Like I was thinking there was something wrong in my head because I'm like, why am I not liking this movie? But it might have been because I was expecting to be scared or have something scary happen, and it really wasn't a horror movie. It was more of a thriller movie. And maybe if I'd gone in not thinking it was a horror movie, I would have enjoyed it more. Maybe I was waiting for something crazy to happen.
That's really interesting because I was always surprised. So this is the only one of Hitchcock's films that got an R rating in the US, and it got an X rating here in Britain. For those who do not know, the X rating in Britain was originally designed for horror movies. That's why one of the first Hammer horror movies is Quatermass Experiment with a big X, is because they wanted to tout that they had this horror X rating. And so it was supposed to be this like really intense, really scary film. Do you think that's maybe why it wasn't popular? Do you think maybe people at the time went in expecting something that it wasn't?
Maybe. Very well could be. I mean, from what I remember, so if I'm right, Psycho was done before this movie, correct?
Yeah, I think almost 10 years.
Okay. And I think that movie was more of a, like you gasp while you're watching it. Like even adult, I mean, like the shower curtain scene, just like someone behind ripping a shower, like that's horrifying. Even if it is in the 50s, you know, like even today, like, you know, it's just like you're in the shower, you can't hear anything. And then like this person comes in, is like, and it's, yeah, this movie just didn't do it. Like, I think if I walked into the movie theater thinking like this is an R-rated thriller, I would have left being like, like, but then again, I wasn't watching, you know, I didn't go to the theater in 1973 where I hadn't seen this stuff. Like, I'm also desensitized because, you know, as we discussed with Tony, like I've seen movies where just crazy stuff happens. So like, it takes a lot to like, for something I haven't seen before. And so, you know, maybe part of it is you're expecting so much. And then part of it is I've seen a lot. You've seen, you know, you were talking about was he talking about those video nasties? Like, you know, I've seen just crazy stuff where you're like, that's gross or that's awesome. And then in this movie is like, okay, well, she screamed, he put a tie on her neck, and then she's dead with her tongue out. The tongue bothered me, if you can't tell. Like it didn't make any sense. It was very cartoonish.
It's a really odd image. Actually, it's actually really strange one as well, because he seems to have this tendency to like a certain face look as well, like because Babs basically looks just like the ex-wife but with red hair, and then the lady in the bed afterwards, same haircut, same everything. It was just that one shot. Must be obsessed with it. And Janet Leigh, and in Psycho, the woman has the same short haircut. He's got this thing. I wonder what his mother looked like. Ooh, not to get all Freudish, but like, you know, they definitely all have that June Cleaver look. They do. And he's known for doing the mother thing. Like Psycho obviously has the mom, but he shoehorned Bob Rusk introducing his mom for 2.5 seconds into this film. How unnecessary was that? Well, wait a minute. There's something with him and mothers then. Like now I got to watch more movies and try to uncover this. I don't know. Yeah. It was crazy, isn't it? It's just, I don't know. I don't know what to think sometimes with him. Because when I watched this movie, I've watched a lot of Hitchcock, and I didn't watch Frenzy till later. And when I watched it, it felt like he was trying to work out some sort of weird fantasy, if you know what I mean. Like he spent that scene where Bob Rusk is killing he rapes her, as you say, and then kills her. Yep. It takes forever. It is the longest. I don't think it's literally the longest in horror film, but it is one of the longest in horror film history. And it takes forever. And you sort of were like, is he just wishing he's killing these women and needs to like blow by blow play it? Does that make sense? Yeah, no, that scene, that's the one in the matrimony office, right? Yeah. And it was just so odd to me where if he would have done the back away, like the stairs, the back away out of the office and like goes through that door. And because that door had like the silhouettes, it was the frosted window, like the curvy window. So if it had like just the silhouettes of somebody like strangling somebody or on top of somebody and backing away, then I think it would have been better because it was a long scene and it would go from legs to screaming and then to like a picture on the wall that's been turned a little bit. So yeah, I mean, it was definitely noticeable. I mean, that's why I had said that before. I just was like, it was frantic. And I understand that maybe that's trying to say like, hey, he's raping and murdering this person. It is frantic. So maybe he's just trying to like
show that, but I think you could do more with that for sure.
Yeah.
But maybe he was trying to work it out. Maybe he was experimenting on how, like, what would look good.
Yeah, that's true. It's funny. I always think, because it's kind of the end of his career, I always kind of think, oh, maybe he's just tired or a bit, sick of it. And he's like, oh, I don't know, just do shots of this. It'll be fine. But maybe you're right. Maybe he was still trying out something new, because he always tried to experiment with film.
And that's, I can get behind that experiment, because, you never know when something's going to hit and it's going to be like, this was great. And now it's used all the time. So, like, that's fine. It's funny, as I was talking about how when a movie doesn't grasp me like that, I will, start not nitpicking, but I start to pick up other things. So in the matrimony office where you were talking about how she's like, and he's about 150 pounds. The police officer comes out with a handbag and he's got it with gloves or a handkerchief, and he's holding her purse with 2 fingers on the straps, and he hands it over very carefully because he's like, hey, this was the purse and there's no money in here. And he doesn't want to disturb the evidence. And he hands it to the inspector, who then puts it on the table and then with no gloves reaches in and starts looking around for the money. And I was like, maybe I've watched too much CSI, but I'm pretty sure that evidence is now thrown away.
I showed this film to a friend of mine, and he said, didn't they have fingerprinting in the 70s? And I was like, yes. And he was like, so they could have found out that Bob Ross was the guy from very early on. And I was like, yeah. Yeah,
I didn't know they had fingerprinting back then either. But yeah, then that would have been like immediate. You just go in and be like, it ain't me. Exactly. Like, let me see your fingerprints. Boop. Oh no, you're just a mean old man. Like, go away. You're not the person. Like, and they can move on. Exactly. But now it seemed like I was actually expecting Bob, who ends up the killer, spoiler alert from 50 years ago. But Bob was like, I kind of thought like, yeah, he works at the market, but I was actually thinking he was more mobsterish. Like, he was always talking with, like, he had the inside scoop on a race and on that horse race. And then the police would always show up, but they were talking to him, but it was never like, you're the guy. He was like, hey, how's it going today, Bob? And he's like, oh, just do him a normal thing. Like, he was almost like there to collect his money to pay off.
Yeah.
They didn't expound on that. So I'm like, well, maybe because that would have been cool. If he's like paying off police officers, and that's why he could have got away with it more.
That would have been cool. I have to say, one of the things they did try to do was make him likable. Please don't take this the wrong way. When I first saw it, I was like, oh, my brother's friendly like that. Because you make friends with everyone. I'm sorry.
Hey, I'll take it. But I mean, I don't own enough ties to murder people, so no one should have to worry.
I didn't mean it like that. But he's like, when you first meet him, he's laid back, he's chill, he's chummy with the police officer. Dick comes over and he's like, do you need money? Have some grapes. He's really friendly. And obviously that's supposed to be his cover. But do you think you could be friends with Bob Rusk?
Probably, because I mean, like you said, I mean, he was like friendly guy. Like, he would have been, like, hey, let's go get a drink. Let's go do this. I definitely could see, at least he wasn't like, Norman Bates and Alfred Hitchcock and Psycho. He's weird.
Yeah.
He's odd, the whole time. Like, where they did make Bob seem a little bit more the everyman, but like a normal person. But then even then, like, you see in the matrimony office, she's like, well, my girls you're not the type of guy from my girls. Like, they're not looking. Yeah. So she could see beyond. She's met him enough, I guess, where she knows he's a little bit odd. But
so this is something I think the age of the film screws up massively. They can't say in 1970s on screen, they can't say that he wanted women who like to be sadomasochists, S&M.
Oh,
so the thing they're not saying the whole time is we can't have women with your glance, preferences, your peculiarities. That's what they meant. He came in asking for a woman who was S&M.
So again, I completely over my head, and probably makes a little bit more sense.
Don't get me wrong. I want to say it here first. We are not in any way implying that you will be a serial killer if you are into S&M. That's what Alfred Hitchcock was trying to do. We are not anti anyone's happiness. You do you. But Alfred Hitchcock obviously thought it was weird, which makes me kind of wonder if that sort of thing of feeling guilty about finding it interesting. And so then he does it on film. So it's like, oh, well, I'm not really like that in prudish 60s Britain, but I can do it on film. Right.
Well, let's be honest. In late 60s, early 70s Britain, or at least London, wasn't that like the swinging London? And like, so you had,
okay,
no,
yeah.
but you had the Soho, and you had like,
Yeah.
there was this counterculture to the, I don't mean it in a negative way for people that are listening, but like that stuffy British, like you have your older people that are very stuffy, and it's like very, you know, like have their tea and they do this. And then you had like that counterculture, just like we did here as well, like with the hippies. But maybe he was, you know, Hitchcock's got some demons in him, man. I'm wondering about his mom. Now I'm wondering about, you know, I think that's a really good point. I did not put that together of like, oh, that's his kink. So
yeah.
Or the character, Bob's character.
Yeah, Bob's character, yeah.
I just figured like she had met him enough where she's like, yeah, he's weird. Like we're not putting him together. But I actually did laugh really hard at the matrimony scene, the very beginning, where Dick comes in and there's this little old man with this woman and they're leaving. And then she's like, well, you know, my old husband had my coffee ready promptly at 9:15 every morning and cleaned the house every day. And he's like, oh, a tidy man. She's like, yep. And then they're going to get married. He's just like, oh, what did I just get myself into?
Yeah.
Like, so I laughed. There were scenes I laughed at, but like I said, not horror, like not super scary. And was there any blood at all in that movie?
I don't think there was. Yeah. Even the woman in the bed afterwards, I don't think he like cuts any of them or anything like that.
Nope. She had like bruises where you could see where like the bar hit on her head, but there was no blood or anything. And I guess so I'm expecting, I'm sitting down, I've got my drink and I'm sitting down, I'm watching the movie and I'm like, there's nothing. There's no blood. A couple butts and a couple nude scenes, because obviously he wants to earn his R or X rating, but like, you know, that movie could have been PG-13.
There is one cringe scene for me, and it might not do it for you. I have a thing about broken bones, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because I've never broken a bone, which is so weird. Okay. But when Bob Rust, the killer, goes into the potato truck, he finds the piece of evidence, his tie pin, grasped in this woman's hand, and it's supposedly heavily rigor mortis. He has to break open her hand, and you hear him snap the fingers.
Snapping.
And
yep.
That, I have to admit, I went, I cringed. Did that do anything spooky for you or no?
No. And maybe it's because I've seen too much. Maybe I'm just desensitized. I'm like, okay, her hand is clasped over this pin is what he's trying to get back, right? And he's just like, but it was just the sound. Like, it was just, I don't know. Like, it just was like, he's got to open him up. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. You know, like sometimes he's got to get there. So, you know. And it might have been, honestly, by that time in the movie, I was like, okay, like let's see where this is going. To me, like in my head, I was just like, It was a movie of wrongfully accused guy who, by all accounts, is like every time he could be in the wrong place at the wrong time, he is, and he's like a curmudgeon. Like he's just not a happy guy, so he is like very fiery. So like, of course, it makes him look to the outsider as it's him the whole time, where then actually it's like the super nice, glad handing guy who's like, hey, my little birdies told me that this 20-1 shot's going to win, and my little birdies are never wrong. Bob's your uncle. Like, and it was like super, I don't know, just all over the place, but so it was a frenzy of a film. Yep.
I did have one other question for you, and I obviously kind of not as cool with this film, but we can go back and do it with other ones. They keep mentioning drinks throughout the film because obviously he's a bartender, but he has brandies throughout the film, and then there's the margarita scene. You know how they do drinks pairings nowadays with everything? They're like, your potato chips go well with this Topsy, whatever. What drink would you pair with this film? Or we can pick one of the other cool films that we've done recently. Like, what would be the drink pairing?
we could do that. We could do that because I ended up having a beer. An American beer for all the English people, like super light, kind of watery. Miller Lite, I think, is what it was. But if you were pairing it, I mean, that would have been more of like a whiskey, bourbon whiskey.
Yeah.
Because it's slower. Like, I think beer is like more like if I'm watching, you know, like Terrifier, where it's just going to be blood and guts and everything. It's like, here's a beer. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy it. But like that was like trying to tell a story, and it was like way more story than the action parts of the thriller stuff and the killings. So that's more of like a sipping drink, right? It's more of this is going to take me 30, 40 minutes to get through.
That makes sense. Would you do the same?
What about you?
Oh, so because I like a good joke, I wouldn't have told them about the film and then given them a margarita. So
there you go.
But it kind of works as well, because it's not something you drink super fast, or at least I don't drink margaritas super fast. I don't drink them as slow as whiskey, but at the same time, it's got lots of the elements. There's limes and it's a fruit market, and you've got the salt on the rim, and you've got salty sense of humor. And I don't know, something about it just kind of works for me.
This is where you being a writer comes in way more than me just being like an idiot who watches movies, because I'm like, yeah, I wanted my drinks to last a little longer because it's a long movie, and I'm like, trying to get into it, where you're like, fruit markets, there's vegetable fruit markets in Covent Garden. It's, tequila, and then she offers the tequila, or tequila is how she calls it.
Yeah, she calls it tequila.
No, that's good. We should definitely do that kind of with more movies, and I'll actually start thinking about that more and actually make my drinks during the movies, and I'll choose which one I add.
Oh, let's do that. I think that'd be cool. Retrospectively, because you've got me curious now. Would you do the same thing for Curse of the Demon? Because that's a very story-driven thing. Would you also want like a whiskey? I
don't know. You know what? It's funny, and I'm not a huge Scotch fan, but I think Scotch, that just seems a little more sophisticated. Like everyone's in their suits and because it's, doctors and stuff. So it's all like the higher society. Maybe it'd just be like pretending like I'm going to have a Scotch while I'm watching these people drink a Scotch. So maybe I would do something like that.
I totally would do a whiskey for that one. I think you're right. Like a nice Scotch whiskey. This is again, Lauren reads too much into stuff. Scotch whiskey is very peaty, very smoky. And there's something about like the storms and the smokiness in that I think that works. I would like whiskey with that.
But see, From Hell would 100% be like red wine, like a Merlot or something.
Oh, yes. That's brilliant.
Because it's Victorian. The red with like it just has that, like, want to sit down with a glass of red wine and just or a bottle of red wine and watch a movie.
No, and I feel like that's also what the killer would have drunk. Ian Holmes' character, the doctor, would have drunk. I think he would have had like a gorgeous red wine and then go out and kill some people.
See, that was another thing, with like From Hell, if you wanted to say, and you said Jack the Ripper kind of inspired Frenzy. Jack the Ripper didn't know these people. These people did not know Jack the Ripper. Or from all accounts, this was a guy who would come in at night and get ladies of the street. They were used to random individuals coming up to them, giving them money for their accompaniment. Where in this movie, they were kind of all known to him, or not known to, but like it was more, I don't know. It just seemed like it was a little different in that sense. Like he wasn't just randomly picking up people in the middle at night.
You're right, because we don't know about the first victims.
The first one, yeah.
But you're right. He knows the wife because he went to the matrimony agency as Mr. Robinson,
right.
And then he knows Babs because he's good friends with her boyfriend with Dick. I wonder though, now that I'm thinking about this, and tell me if you think I'm totally off base here, that he used to just kill like random women, go on a date, and then date goes wrong, but then everyone starts getting interested, the cops get interested, and Dick gets in this situation where he's like, whatever. And Bob is the one who says, you should go to your wife. Isn't she loaded? Maybe he goes, I can frame Bob. And he like leans.
Probably so. Yeah.
Sorry, I can frame Dick.
Yeah. And he did frame. I mean, because he even invited him to come back to his apartment and stay there, and then goes and tells the cops he's in my apartment.
Yeah.
But no, maybe he was like, this is my way out of this. Because you're right, where it starts, we don't know how many murders. It obviously was going on a long time, enough that he was the necktie killer when the woman in the river shows up.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't his first one.
Right.
And this maybe was his way of like, oh, I can just do this, and then I'm scot-free for a while, and then I'll just have to like kill him some other way.
You see, there you go. Talking with you has brought out this whole separate layer of potentially there's more to this film than I thought. That's not to say that you should feel like you have to watch it now, but just like it's good. Talking to you makes it a better movie. Is that weird? Should we be like, no, this is terrible. Don't go see it.
I wouldn't recommend it necessarily to, like I said, to my friends. If someone was like, hey, would you watch this movie? I'd probably be like, no. I mean, I now own it because I just ended up purchasing it on Prime, and I'm like,
oh, I'm sorry.
I'll probably not watch it again. No, and it, you get those. Not every movie is going to blow you out of the water. So, but I think talking with you definitely made me think of things that I would not have thought about. What I need to do then is we need to watch one together. We need to get like one of those watch party things on Prime or whatever, where like you can watch them at the same time and like that might have made me enjoy the movie more. Like, oh, how did you miss that? He was, like the river was dirty or clean, and then the body shows up, and I'm like, okay, I get the joke there. I get the end of the joke there. But that was, 14 hours ago. I'm like, what's going on?
Seriously, we need to figure out how to do it, because obviously a little bit hard to do with the time difference, but we can make it. Yep. I think it'll be good.
I'll just stay up overnight one night. We could do that. So, but no, that would be, we definitely, I think if we're going to do the next movie we do, not if, but when we do another movie, I think we need to blow it out of the water on the horror side.
Yes. I have some thoughts. So I like the idea, because we've done a bunch in the past now, of doing one that's a little bit more contemporary. And Cockneys versus Zombies has a lot of great kills. It's really funny. I know you've seen it before, but we can rewatch.
I will 100% rewatch Cockney versus Zombies.
Awesome film, right? And I think there's a lot of cool deaths in there, as well as the humor.
All right, so next episode, you've picked Cockney versus Zombies. I'm excited about this one. I'm ready to get back in the saddle of enjoying the movie that I am watching thoroughly. It's dumb enough for me to understand it. There's no hidden messages or scenes in there. It's just, this person's dead, you kill him, and make it look interesting, and then we'll laugh about it. I'm in.
Awesome. And let's have a think about what we want to drink with it. I like this question. I want to keep the question up. Awesome.
I'll have to come up with something really good.
I'll text you. We won't tell you, audience, but we will surprise you with our
Yes. Time to head to the liquor store and see what's out there that could be interesting to pair with zombie killing Cockneys.
It's going to be awesome. I'm going to do far too much academic research and find out if there's a Cockney drink. That's going to be my nerd moment. It'll be great.
See, I was just going to get my Cockney to English dictionary out and do some rhyming slang in the middle of the pod.
Amazing.
Apples and stairs. Is that
Wait, no, apples and pears means
apples
stairs.
And pears. I got to freshen up on it. That's all. I got to freshen up on it. It's like if you put me in the middle of France, I might know a few words. That's how it is with Cockney. I know that there was rhyming things that meant stairs. I just thought it was apples and stairs means pears. But it was this opposite.
I'm pretty sure half of it you could make up, and if you can explain it, it's fine. Like you could to a normal person, not to a Cockney, but to me, you'd be able to be like, oh, the trees and bees means please. I'm sorry, that all rhymed, but whatever, and I'd be like, oh, okay.
Well, I will just say I have a Cockney to English dictionary, thankfully from a Christmas a few years ago. So I will break that out, and I will maybe throw in some Cockney rhyming slang in the next pod.
Awesome. Things to look forward to. Thank you guys so much for listening. We've had a lot of fun, even though it wasn't necessarily a top movie. Always good to talk to you, Chris. Thank you so much for being on again.
Oh, love it. Always.
And thank you all for listening. We will hear from you next month, and we'll be watching Cockneys versus Zombies.
If you want to share your thoughts about this episode, please head to our Facebook or YouTube pages. We're grateful to Cucurbit, who made our music. Thank you for listening, and please join us next time for the London Horror Movie Club.